podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone and welcome to Howie the Podcast. It's Gav and you join us for our news pod. Lots going on in the world of Sunderland and we like to bring you up to date on all these things, have a little natter, maybe get to chat about things that we don't normally get to chat about on the regular pods after games and all that. So yes, we are here. Joining me first off is Jonny Hawley. Hello mate.
All right, Gav. Nice to be back.
Yes, very nice. And Chris Wynn is with us. Hello mate.
Hello Mr. Henderson. And before we get into it, big bravo to you getting up hungover to talk about Sunderland's defeat to Oxford United, because I don't think I would do that with a hangover, mate. That's for sure.
Well, I didn't even have a hangover. I was great. I was just tired.
You're a machine, you, though. That's a problem, isn't it?
It's the Guinness. I'm telling people this all the time now. Since I went from lager to Guinness, I don't get hangovers. I think there's a thing in that. If anyone hasn't heard that, by the way, cracking pod, I think, if I do say so myself, between me, Brett and Martin at the weekend. Of course, Jonny and Chris, they got together after the game as well for a reaction pod. So
we said it all first, you see.
You did. So I purposely said to people on the review, I think pretty much the first thing I said was, Chris promised you an extended review of the game and I'm not going to give you that because nobody needs to relive this again. So we can chat about a few more fun things today, I think. Kicking us off, though, the EFL Awards, which took place at the Grosvenor House Hotel in London on Monday night. It was broadcast on Sky Sports Football, very well put together event, not something I've ever watched before, but I paid attention this time because there were a number of awards which directly affected Sunderland. We had Regis Labrise up for Manager of the Year in the Championship, we had Jobe up for Young Player of the Year, and we had Chris Rigg up for the Apprentice of the Year. And pleased to say that in the majority of those cases, we came out on top, and Jobe won the Young Player of the Year award ahead of CJ Egan-Riley from Burnley, which surprised me, if I'm honest. Jobe totally deserves it, but I just think when you consider the season that Egan-Riley's had, I was expecting him to win that one, but good on Jobe for getting in that. He also got in the team of the season, which is great, in the centre of midfield. Chris Rigg won the Apprentice of the Year award, which is something, when we talked about this on the news pod the other week, I was like, what the hell is Apprentice of the Year? So I had to look into it, and it's it's exactly as it says, really. It's the 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds. There's an award just for them. It doesn't come under Young Player of the Year, but Chris Rigg won that, and there was no chance he wasn't going to win that because he's played 40-odd games in the Championship this season. And Regis Labrise didn't win Manager of the Year, but considering he was on a 4-man shortlist, which included all of the teams which are above us at the minute, all managers who've had plenty of money to spend this year on players and stuff, I think it's commendable that Regis Labrise made the list. Chris, I'll come to you first on Jobe then, because he's, like I said, won Young Player of the Year, got into the team of the season. I think it caps off really a fantastic individual season for him. I know he was afterwards trying to, he was trying to make it more about the team basically afterwards. But I think he does, it's nice when they get a bit of individual praise players, and, fully deserved in my opinion.
Yeah, fully deserved. I think when we were in form, I think he was basically one of the first names on the team sheet, and we were all kind of absolutely gushing over him at certain points this season. And, when he's been missing, it's in those times when we see how important he's been to us this season. And for me, I've said it a few times on the pod, I see this season, and loads of people will say, oh, well, it was a fairly big, profile move from Birmingham City. And that, he played 20 odd games, I think, for Birmingham in the Championship the season before he left. And then he played 40, or I think it was like almost 46 games or something he played for us in his first season. But I think this season's been his breakthrough year. I've said it a few times, I think this season he has found what type of player he is. I think it was George Ellick even mentioned, from somebody who watches us from the outside, doesn't watch us week in, week out. He was like, I can't understand the Bellingham experiment, like when you played him up front. He said it didn't make any sense. And I think you've got to put that down to the kind of bad recruitment we had for that year, that we didn't have a striker and he ended up playing up there. And in some ways, you could potentially argue that he kind of lost part of that year, his first year with us, because of the way we kind of messed him around and played him in positions he should have never been played in. And it was obvious even in that season when he picked up the ball and the game was in front of him, he was a completely different player. And as it's turned out this season, we've put him in that deeper role and he's been absolutely brilliant. He's been one of the best midfielders in the Championship. You know, obviously he's got the Young Player of the Year award, but he has been one of the most consistent midfielders in the league. And so for me, this is his breakthrough season. And yeah, I mean, you know, the profile he's getting now, team of the season. And if you look at team of the season as well, I was looking into that, and you've got, I think it's three from Burnley. I think it is. Oh no, yeah, 3 from Burnley. Obviously the defence and the 2 central defenders. 3 from Leeds, 2 Sheffield United, 2 from Norwich. So there's only 5 clubs represented, you know, and Bellingham's in that midfield. So it just goes to show kind of the profile he's getting with the way he's played this season. And you know, there is, we'll get onto it, but obviously rumours that regardless of where we end up, he might not be here next season.
Yeah, we'll leave that chat for the next the next section. But yeah, Jonny, Jobe, he really does deserve all the accolades, in my opinion. Chris touched on it there. You know, when you think about last year, there was quite a lot of pressure from fans in particular to get him out of the team because people felt he was being flogged and it wasn't helping him and stuff. But when you look at him now, you've got to think that experience, that exposure he got was worth it in the end, because he's a better player for it, and he's still just a baby, really. You know, you look at him and you see the size of him, and you think, bloody hell, he's massive in that. But he is still, you know, he's still a kid. He's still learning. He's still developing, and undoubtedly, he's been one of the standout players in this team this season. And he's just, at times, some of the stuff he does, he's just a joy to watch, isn't he?
Yeah, and I agreed with what you said before, Gav, that you were a little bit surprised that he got the award in the end. Not because he doesn't deserve it, but just because, you know, you kind of expect maybe Burnley's defence or whatever to get the main plaudits. But I thought specifically with Jobe as well, it was pleasing because his first half of the season was so good. And our first half of the season as a team was so good. It's easy then when it comes to the end of season awards time for that recency bias creeps in and people start thinking like, oh, well, you know, Sunderland have lost 4 in a row and, you know, struggled since the new year or all that sort of stuff. But yeah, when you think about the season as a whole and the amount of incredible performances Jobe's put in and how poor we've looked at times when he's been missing, I think it is totally fully deserved. So, you know, massive round of applause for Jobe on that one. And I think it's interesting as well, isn't it, when you do look back at last season and the way that we used him. You know, I think, you know, Chris talked about when we kind of slotted him in up front a few games and whether that worked or not. And Gav, you were talking about people calling for him to be kind of dropped or rested at times. Which, look, I mean, you know, you could have fair arguments about that either way at the time, but I think it should be another lesson to us as a fan base to, when it comes to youth development, sometimes we really do need to just take a step back and trust what the club are doing, because they've proven now with a wide selection of players that they do know what they're doing. Who knows whether Jobe would be as dominant and physically, you know, able to throw himself about in the middle of midfield as he is now, if he hadn't spent time playing up front, playing deeper, playing in the hole, kind of experiencing all these different aspects of what it takes to play in, you know, various positions at this level against such physically strong teams as you get in the Championship. And I think the same for Chris Rigg. You know, there's been times this season where I think all of us have been guilty of saying, you know, just looks like he needs a rest, or he just looks like he needs a few games out the team. But, you know, he's getting this apprenticeship award or whatever they called it. You know, again, fully deserved, but he's got this award off the back of this season's performances. But then thinking of Jobe and the transformation from last season to this season, who knows what Chris Rigg might look like in 6, 8, 12 months' time, you know, once he's had the same kind of development period. So, yeah, I think it's great for the players to get that recognition, and I think it's fully deserved. But I also think it's a real nice bit of vindication for the approach that the club as a whole have been taking, which, you know, I want to see more positivity around the club at all times. So I'm totally happy to see all this. Like,
and it makes me, or it reminds me, Chris, that we, you know, when in the face of quite a lot of criticism at the minute for the team and stuff, we are genuinely the envy of the majority of clubs in this country at this level, who would love to have players like Jobe and Chris Rigg available and in their team, and everybody talking about their players. It's very easy to get distracted from that. But it's a big tick in the box for the way that the club are trying to work. Because, and Jonny mentioned Chris Rigg there. I mean, I don't know much about this award that he's actually won in the permutations and stuff. But for a lad that age to be playing, when people are picking their teams for the playoffs and the heads and stuff, I'm not sure Chris Rigg, when we've got a fully fit squad, is in everybody's, but I think he's in the managers, because when he's fit, he plays. They quite clearly think a lot of him. And for somebody that age to have played 40 odd games in the Championship, it doesn't happen anymore. I remember, you've had conversations with the likes of Gary Owers and Gordon Armstrong and people like that this last couple of weeks on the pod. And back in their day, that was perfectly normal for a 17-year-old to just get a chance. But it isn't normal anymore. It's like Chris Rigg's actually the exception, not the rule. Because I looked, and there's the two other lads who were nominated for the apprenticeship. I think one was at Cardiff and one was at Stoke. And I think they had about 10 appearances between them, and I don't think many of them were starts. It just shows you, doesn't it, that Rigg's been treated quite uniquely by Sunderland. Like, it's not something that's widespread in football anymore.
It's not, but it is at Sunderland, like we've seen over the last few years. You look at, well, for a start, actually, that Apprentice of the Year, I mean, it's a load of bollocks, basically. I mean, it's either a young player or he's not. You know what I mean? I mean, what's the difference? Are you just saying that you're including players who've come through at that club, or what? I mean, what's the rules? What's the criteria? Let's give it to some Bens that might not get player of the season. I mean,
you've got to be on £90 a week.
Exactly. I mean, you've literally got to still be on your YTS or something like that, But anyway, look, well done for Chris Rigg for getting the award that he was up for, because he was up for it. But I think people forget, because especially Bellingham, because he was around last season and like I said, went through some kind of problems, that we were trying to work it out, and he went through dips in form. And when players have been around for a couple of seasons, you tend to forget how young they are. I mean, look, Chris Rigg, and the other thing, I mean, we'll touch on as well. There was apparently that incident I think a few people are talking about at the end of the game at Oxford, where it got a bit of stick, and the lad's 18 in June. I mean, you saw pictures of him in his suit, when he was like going up for his award, and he's about to turn 18, and I think most lads, by the time they're 18, the only suit they're getting is for their school prom. You know what I mean? It's not like going to the English Football League Awards and picking up one of the best football, like one of the best young football awards in the country. He's doing that at 18, and what was it a while back? We were laughing, but he was 29th in some French football magazine of young players across Europe or something like that. Again, I don't know what the criteria is at, but people love picking their top 50s and all that sort of bollocks, don't they? But look, you're talking at that age, and you mentioned Gary Owers and Gordon Armstrong playing loads of games. Gordon Armstrong played 50 odd games in a season. Like, one of the stats came up. Jobe Bellingham's now played, I think it's 107 league games, and he turns 20 in September. I mean, that's some stat, isn't it? And then you look at Chris Rigg, and you talked about him coming through last season. Last season, we kind of nursed him in, obviously, with his age. I mean, look, God, he's still only 17, about to turn 18. And he's played like 40 games this season, I think he might have played. There's only 4 players, I think, who played more games than Chris Rigg this season. In total, I think. I mean, that's nuts when you think about his age, and you think about dips in form, and people going, oh, well, he's had a dip in form, and we haven't seen much of him recently and all this, and you're like, he's 17. Like, at some point, you talk about players who are in their prime, and you watch like things like the overlap, and the amount of times they say, I don't think I had a season where I wasn't carrying a knock or I wasn't doing that. This is Chris Rigg's first full season at like 40 games. And he's played, like I said, well over 40 games. So he'll be going through the kind of pain barrier to kind of finish this season and keep going week in, week out. I mean, you could argue he could have been managed properly and played fewer games. But my statement at the beginning was, this is what Sunderland do. And I remember me and you, Gav, talked a lot about what we did with Dan Neil, who now, if you look in the squad, is an old fella, basically, compared to people who are playing alongside him. But that's what we did. He was making mistakes, and the club were like, no, he's brilliant, and he's going to be brilliant, so we just play him. And the club were first season back in the Championship. I remember the Sheffield United game with the sending off. It's like, nah, he's fine. I'm going to play him, brilliant. And that's what we do. All young players and there's going to be a few more. And that I think quite a lot. You look at that. A lot of clubs, again, talking to was it Gordon Armstrong and Martin Smith, both emphasised how much the under 18s and under 21s are being watched by other clubs. And, the way we're working now, just like the Chris Riggs of the world, we're now thinking, well, if they leave in a year or two, we've got this player who can then step in and happy days. And, when your clubs ran like that, that you're not too concerned about the rumours about players leaving.
No. Just quickly, Jonny, Gus Hamer got player of the year from Sheffield United. Scott Parker, manager of the season. Obviously pipped our head coach to that. Any complaints about those two winners?
I have a complaint about, in general, around manager of the season awards that always just go to someone who either wins the league or gets automatic promotion. Because, Scott Parker's done an amazing job and the defence is fantastic, but with me biased Sunderland hat on for a second, is it not more impressive to take a team from 16th to 4th than it is to take a team from Premier League relegation to Premier League promotion? But that gripe aside, I don't think we could have laid a fair claim to
Liam Manning for me.
Yeah, exactly. Even Sunderland specs to one side, Manning would have been another decent shout for that award. But just like in the Premier League, it's always, Pep Guardiola or whoever wins manager of the season. It's the same down here. But like player of the season wise, I don't think we could have really complained. I don't think we've had a single standout performer who would have been up for that award. Like, maybe last season, somebody like Jack Clark could have been up there, but, with the way that Mundell's missed so much of the season through injury and, Isidore's blown hot and cold and stuff like that, I think, it's fair enough. And look, Harner's a great footballer in his own right as well. So, fair play to him.
You say it's a gripe, Jonny, but I agree with you. Actually, I think that it's very easy just to pick the bloke who, Burnley's defensive record has been outstanding, and they've got promoted, and Parker does deserve credit for that. But it isn't as impressive as what Labree's done, in my opinion, or Manning. And you could even, I know people might not like this, but you could even club Lampard in there, considering where he took them over from. They were in the relegation zone, or they were down there. And, feasibly they could finish in the top 6. So, I would say all of that's more impressive than taking a team with hundreds of millions of pounds worth of players and then spending a fortune and getting them promoted. Absolutely. I mean, look at Daniel Farke was also up for the award. He's about to lose his job.
Currently, he's won, 7 points more than he won last season? Or something, or
more, I think. But he can win another 3 if they win at the weekend.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, how much of an improvement is that? Not that much. When you look at, again, going back to us, how many points are better off are we now than we were at the end of last season? Not to mention the fact that we're actually going to be in the playoffs and might go up. But not to blow too much smoke up Reggie's backside, but I'd have had him ahead of Parker and Farke with no hesitation.
I think we've got to caveat all of this with the fact that I'm pretty sure these are the awards that ignored our goal at Reading for goal of the season. I think.
Oh God, yeah.
So let's put an asterisk against all of this. It's picked by a panel who might have mates and mates and mates and all that sort of stuff. But one thing I did want to mention was the award that Neil Warnock got. Over 1,600 games as manager is absolutely ridiculous. And to put it into perspective, I was 7 going into the 1990 playoffs, the playoff finals. And I remember we played Swindon to go up the top division, but the division, I think it was a Division 4 playoff. He was managing Notts County in the 4th division playoff in 1990, which is absolutely ridiculous. And 1,600 games is nuts, isn't it?
And he's still not done. There's 100% he'll pop up somewhere at some point. He gets bored, doesn't he, and just ends up he'll take a job in March next year or something, and he just cannot stay away from the game, Neil Warnock.
He's one of those managers where I always think, how have you never managed us?
Well, there's obviously the stories about Warnock, and he was on the show, obviously on the Malcolm Crosby pod. This was mentioned, wasn't it, Chris?
Yeah, well, you clearly haven't listened to it, Johnny. You need to go and listen to that pod straight. So as soon as we finished here, go and stick it on and listen to Martin Crosby. Yeah, I mean, it's a massive what if. I mean, he was basically lined up for the job. He was ready to take it. And then Martin Crosby kept on winning cup games, and yeah, the rest is history. And he was like saying, "No, I'm not taking over because Martin Crosby's my mate, and I'm not doing him out of a job because he was meant to go and join Dennis Smith at Bristol City." So it's a massive. I mean, imagine. I mean, I just feel like we were kind of almost his type of club, that kind of no nonsense manager, but massive what if.
Yeah, and just on the goal of the season, I can't remember which goal won it, but it wasn't as good as Isidore's 2 or 3 goals that were just all absolutely world class. And even Mayenda, I know maybe that one was scored a bit too close to the vote, so that wouldn't have been included. But I genuinely, not just because I'm a Sunderland fan, but I genuinely think that we've scored 3 or 4 goals this season that were better than the one that won it. I think it was like a corner, cross came over and the lad volleys a top corner. I can't remember who scored it now. Be more prepared. But yeah, I like even there, it's so subjective, isn't it? Like, I think that's basically the premise of this. Like, you're pulling hairs really when you're thinking about, well, C.J. Egan-Riley or Jobe Bellingham. Like, they probably both deserve to win it. You know what I mean? Like, it's and I even saw with Harmer, there's been a lot of Burnley fans kicking off because Josh Brownhill's got loads more goals and assists than he has, and is actually automatically promoted as the captain of Burnley. And people are saying, well, hang on, why did he not? Do you know what I mean? Every club's got their own bias. But even still, we're not trying to do down the awards, but it's more for me. I just think it's nice to be recognised. I think it's nice that Jobe and Chris Rigg have had a spotlight shone on them. It highlights that the approach we've got when it comes to young players is correct. And for our manager to be named on the shortlist for team of the manager of the season, when we've just mentioned a handful of other names who probably should have been nominated too and didn't, I think that's commendable. And I just think we should be proud that we've actually achieved that. On top of that, by the way, just wanted to give a quick mention. Luke Molyneux and Denver Hume both made the League Two team of the season. Luke Molyneux's at Doncaster now, and I think Denver Hume plays for Grimsby, if I remember rightly. Denver Hume's got something like 15 assists from left back this season. I totally forgot about him because he had such a torrid time with injuries, and then I think Portsmouth, he's a bit of a meme at Portsmouth because they spent a fortune on him and he just never played, but he's gone to Grimsby and done really well. So again, when we're talking about pathways and we're talking about the Academy of Light, there are 2 players who came through our academy. All right, didn't work out for them at Sunderland in the end. Denver Hume played his fair share of first team football, but they ended up leaving. And it shows to any kid in the academy now that even if you don't make it at Sunderland, you can still have a good career in the game, in the pyramid. And I just wanted to give them props. I know it's Kayla. I'm going to butcher this name. The lad at Barnsley. David Keeler Dunn? Is that his name?
Davis, I think. Davis Keeler.
Oh, I don't know. I'm awful with names. But he also apparently played for our academy and he's had a crack season in League One. So yeah. Anyways, we mentioned it before very briefly, but there have been more stories about Jobe. And this might be the 7th or 8th news pod where we've had stories about Jobe leaving the club. But yes, in Germany, we've had 2 outlets come up over the weekend with different stories. Bild have reported he's wanted by Dortmund again. They named the price as 25 million euros. Sky Sports Germany have claimed that he's wanted by RB Leipzig, who, of course, I think Jurgen Klopp's got some say in the running of that outfit. So, not surprising that he's been linked with clubs abroad, Johnny, but at the same time, German teams, it's the path his brother took. It wouldn't shock you, would it?
No, it feels like both the laziest and easiest link to make, but also the one that makes the most sense. Like, there's a reason it's the go-to of following his brother's footsteps to Germany. I think we've talked about it before, haven't we, Gav, on a couple of these, like, you see the logic, get away from the spotlight in terms of the English media and the pressure that comes with the level of scrutiny that you get, particularly in the Premier League in this country. And if you're a young English promising player, and then obviously the Bellingham name on top, like, if I was advising him in any sort of capacity, I'd be saying, give some serious thought to which country you want to be playing in next. So yeah, I totally see why they make the links. And it also wouldn't surprise us if there is, at least some amount of truth in them, because if you are Borussia Dortmund, you'd be daft not to consider making a move for Jobe as well. Like, you've seen what happened with Jude. He'll obviously, well, presumably Jude will have positive experiences to draw from his time at Dortmund and kind of say to his brother, like, look, if you go there, it's a good club and X, Y, Z. And, so I wouldn't be surprised if that is something that is being pursued, at least from their end. I'd be surprised if he went to Leipzig purely because they seem very PR savvy, the Bellinghams. And, with the Red Bull connection and the idea of, buying success and stuff, which is, it's kind of anathema in German football, where they've all got the 50+1 fan ownership status and stuff, that, the Red Bull lot are not massively well liked. So just purely from that side of things, I would maybe be a bit hesitant if I was Jobe to be going there. But in general, these links will continue apace, won't they, over the coming weeks and months. Incidentally, I was walking down the front street in Leeds the other day, and there's a big Adidas advert on the front of the Sports Direct, and it's Jobe who's front and centre in the middle of this advert for Adidas, and it just like made us kind of chuckle as I was walking past it, thinking like, yeah, blimey, he is quite big, isn't he? Like, he's quite a famous lad now. So, yeah, with that level of attention and winning these awards and everything, yeah, we'll not hear the end of it until and unless there's a day comes where we get a club statement saying, Jobe Bellingham moves on with our best wishes to Club X.
Yeah.
But yeah, rambly way to say I think Germany makes sense.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the sort of brand Bellingham thing, because there was part of us was thinking about them awards, thinking, has it just edged it towards him? Because when the EFL share all these posts about the awards and stuff, Jobe's going to be all over them, and we know how big of his social media following is ridiculous, isn't it? He's got something like 4 times as many Instagram followers as the club does, just because he's a Bellingham. It's crazy, but you are buying brand Bellingham, aren't you, Chris, when you're buying Jobe? And I'm hoping all this adds a few extra zeros on the end of the price tag when teams do come sniffing.
So what you're saying is the English Football League have jumped on the Bellingham bandwagon. That's what you're saying.
What was the first line that the guy said when they announced the award? He said he's now they're the first brothers to have ever won this award. The first thing they said was about his brother. I mean, yeah, it does make you think.
English Football League in Rigging Award shocker by Gavin.
Rigging, I like it. Rigging. Yeah.
There you go. There, see, it works on many levels. See, I'm not just a pretty face girl, but there I was looking at the headline. The headline in Bill's quite interesting. Where it's Dortmund gambles again for the mini Bellingham. Which is quite interesting. But and then the article actually starts off by saying it would probably be the, in capitals, transfer coup of Dortmund's summer, which is quite interesting. But yeah, talking about around 25 million euros in the article. And I was trying to compare, and we're talking about brand Bellingham, and I've again talked a couple of times because when you hear about I think it was Solskjaer talking about his brother and Man United and how they had everything mapped out, and I was just looking, and obviously, Jude moved to Dortmund, what was after his first full season at Birmingham, in a similar way to what I was saying, what I consider to be Jobe's first full season at Sunderland, really, where that's the player he is. I think Jude found who he was quite earlier on and knew what kind of a player he was. I think Jobe's needed to find himself a little bit more, and obviously that's meant it's happened a little bit later. And again, I think, what I talked about last season and potentially losing that year. But Jobe's 20 in September. Jude was around 20 when he joined Madrid. So if you look at it like that, it's almost at the same stage where it's like, right, at this point, you make your next step up. And I honestly, it doesn't matter what happens at the end. I don't expect Bellingham to be in a Sunderland shirt next season. I think he's gone, and it's basically a question of where. I think Jonny, I was going to say a similar thing in terms of, is the German link a lazy one? But because they know the Bellinghams and they've got contacts, you wouldn't be surprised if Dortmund was going to be the location if he did go to Germany, just because they know them and they know what type of person he is. And I think that probably counts for a lot. When they're spending that much. But when you're talking about a young player who might potentially go on the top level, 25 million euros isn't all that much. It's not a huge gamble, but they did say with other targets in the article that it all depends on Dortmund reaching the Champions League. which is basically they have to do that to be able to afford Bellingham and some of the other players they want. So it's going to be interesting because I do think he's moving on, and it's time for him to, in his head and with his camp, to move on. I just don't think he'll stay in England. I think the Bellinghams think that with the profile and kind of Jonny touched on it with the spotlight in this country, I think they just think, you can become one of the best players in the world and you do not have to play in the Premier League.
Well, that's it, yeah. And obviously the plan for Jude was very, very similar, wasn't it? So, yeah, I'm probably in agreement. Very sadly, probably going to lose him, but it might also be the best time to sell in terms of, his value as a youngster. If he then plays a season in the Premier League and doesn't do very well, he maybe won't be as fancied. The price won't be as high. And when you consider the way we bought him, we got him for £3 million, which feels like pennies now, really. The plan was probably always to do this. And it was interesting to know that because I heard him do the interview on the stage during the awards ceremony, and then he did an interview with the club as well. And he obviously very, very savvy in the way, like very switched on young lad, and his brother's the same. They come across really well in these interviews and stuff. But he was asked about his ambitions and stuff, and he really talked up his team and his club and the fans. And I know all players do this, but when he said it, you believe it. It doesn't sound like someone's told him to say those things. He comes across really well. And if there was any uncertainty around what he's going to do next season, he didn't give anything away. Like, he just seemed very, very laser focused about the ambition for this season, and that's why we put a tweet out about it afterwards, because I think he really tried to get across that they're trying to achieve something special for the supporters this year, and it just made us think, it is that we need to get behind these lads for the last run. We need to just get on board with whatever they're doing. Doesn't matter how poor the results have been. We've got to really crack on from this point. So, yeah, well done, Jobe, and let's hope we hang on to him for as long as we can. But I'm not hopeful about that. That kind of leads us.
So, just a tiny thing to add as well is Chris Rigg basically said the same thing. If you read some of the quotes from him accepting his award, he was like, "It's really, really nice to win individual accolades, of course, but we as a team are fighting for a bigger prize in a few weeks," or whatever the words were. So I think it was
to be fair, they've got that, it's like basically, here's your script, when you win.
Yeah.
And it's like make sure you say this. And it's like they're so trained now. I mean, I mentioned a couple of weeks back, it's that you remember that player who when they won a cup game and they turned around and went, "Oh, it was a great 3 points," just because they're so trained in what to say, and they'll have had their script, so don't worry about that. I wouldn't have, let's not be thinking that's from the heart.
Oh, no, I'm not getting too dewy-eyed over it, but even if it is like all coordinated, I think it still does show that like the fact that the club are trying to get that message out there says that they've recognised that, even with the wobble recently, like, there is still a common cause to get everyone united and get everyone behind and aiming for and pulling in the right direction. So, as long as we keep that in mind going forward.
Say something like,
keep Victor and each be well away from our place. Social media accounts will be fine.
They'll be jetting off, or they will be there now. You would have thought, to Portugal to join the rest of the squad. And I know we've touched on this a couple of times since the weekend about the fact that the squad have effectively they've headed off to Portugal for some warm weather training ahead of the QPR game. But Regis Lebris did have something to say about it after the match on Saturday. He said, "We're in a situation where it will almost be like a pre-season camp. We will live together, spend time together. It's very important. It's not a reward. It's preparation. This is really clear. We'll train properly. We'll have meetings to prepare the next games. We will have a vacation in the summer. This is not that. It is preparation." So, because I did throw that up in the air on the pod that we did at the weekend when I said, has this been arranged basically because of the form recently, or was this well in advance? Was this always the plan to go abroad just before the playoffs to basically give the lads a change of scenery and stuff? I'll just grab your thoughts on it, Jonny. The fact that they're heading to Portugal, I think, we probably do have to talk about this because it's unusual, right? I mean, when does a team ever do some warm weather training the week or the days before the final game of the season. It just doesn't happen, does it? But it all feeds into this, this thing we've been talking about for weeks and weeks now, about this being like a mini pre-season. I mean, Labrise has literally used the words pre-season. Like, we've treated this period as though we're starting a new season, and it's just interesting to me that we've done this. And I think there are clearly positives to going abroad, isn't there? I can't think of many downsides. I mean, the only thing being this week's going to be the warmest week of the year so far, and we went abroad for some warm weather training, and it's going to be 23 degrees in Sunderland this week. So at the same time, but still though, I think it's just that change of environment, that change of scenery, get them away from the noise, and try and get back on track for the QPR game.
Aye, well, you took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say, let's get away for a warm weather training camp in the warmest week that we've had in like about 9 months or whatever. But that to one side, I think it's not. There's a difference, isn't there, between going to, like, sometimes players will do altitude training, or like really go to somewhere really, really hot, like, you're getting into your 30s and your 35 degrees. Average temperatures and stuff, and they go to try and physically prepare and go through really, really hard sessions or whatever. This isn't that, is it? I think this is much more for the separation and the mental side of stuff, because I think you were right, like, just getting away from the noise is probably going to be just as important as anything else of whatever they're doing over the next week, because they're talking up the preparation side and the meetings and what have you, but they would be doing those anyway. They would just be doing them at the Academy of Light instead. So I don't think it's anything like technical, or there's some aspect of the training that they want to be able to access. I think it will be much more about getting away and also being specifically together at all times as a unit. Because like, if you're at home, obviously they've all got families, they've all got places that they live, and they go and spend their evenings however they want to. But when they're all together in the same hotel or whatever it is, and, they're eating every meal together, and they're, traveling together, and they'll be in little groups, and there'll be little 3s and 4s of them going off and doing whatever, playing golf or what have you. But just being together as a group and building that atmosphere again, going into the playoffs, I think hopefully is going to make a big difference. And for that reason, I suspect this would have been planned well in advance, regardless of whatever's happened with results and performances over the last few weeks. Because I think whether we were on the back of 4 losses or 4 wins or something in between, I think that benefit of getting everybody together and like really trying to emphasize that kind of team bonding and team spirit is going to be just as important as any tactical preparation or physical fitness that they work on over the next week. Good thing then, Chris, do you think, to go to Portugal?
Well, it's nothing new when it comes to playoffs. Again, I think Gordon Armstrong might have mentioned it a few weeks back, or it might have been Gary Hours, can't remember. But they were talking about in the build-up to the playoffs, obviously they wanted to get away from it all because we were playing Newcastle and everything was on top of them. The media was everywhere and all that. And Dennis Smith took them away. I think they went to Magaluf or something like that. I think they regretted it because they went on the piss for 4 days or something like that. But actually, in some ways, you kind of hope that the players do kind of go on the piss for a couple of days, or at least one of them, just to kind of say, right, let's kind of almost have it out, get a few drinks down and get a few laughs going, and kind of have that as the starting point. And you hope, you've got images in your head of, you remember when you saw videos of England when they were at the hotels and that, on multicolored unicorns in the pool and all that sort of stuff. You wouldn't be surprised if they were doing all that sort of, getting a psychologist in and saying, what type of things is, best to get the lads together and all that sort of stuff. And they'll be doing all that. But it's, and I think Jonny touched on it there, that I think you look at the form, and look, it's no excuse for the form and the level of performance, but you could see that the players this will have been planned way in advance, just purely because of logistics. Like the club will have said, these players have got kids and stuff like that. So you have to tell them, you can't just whisk them off and go, oh, we're going to Portugal tomorrow, lads. And, suddenly go, oh shit, I've got to sort things out. So this will have been sorted for a while. And you could see that the players would potentially have one eye on it, going, actually, that's the cut off. Basically, let's just limp to there, get away. And then when we come back, that's when we kind of start and get going. And it sounds ridiculous, but sometimes, when you're just working normally and you've got a holiday coming up and you've got like a big job to do or a big project or something like that, and you think, tell you what, I'll just get to the holiday, and then after that I'll get cracking the Monday I get back. And obviously you don't get cracking the Monday you get back, but you know what I mean.
I was going to say, I hope the players are better than me the Monday after a holiday.
I got in there before you did. I could see you already bursting to see that, Jonny. But you know what I mean, though. It's like it's the psychology of it, where you're thinking, I've got that break and I've got that. It's almost that end of one thing and start of another, and then it's like coming back and saying, right, well, we've now got a 4-game season, basically starting with QPR. We come back from the break refreshed. We get back into it, get back on the saddle, and then it's not just because you'll see. I reckon the likes of Sheffield United and obviously the other clubs, they won't be going away this week. They won't be going away in this side of the preparation. They'll go away after that final game and then come back saying, right, we're ready for the playoffs. Whereas we're saying we're going to have the cut-off, then we have 1 game's grace where it's like, then we get into it, then we've got the playoffs. So we've got this 4-game season almost where it's like that's after the point where we're refreshed and but like I said, it's no excuse for it, but it's just human nature, isn't it? It's just the psychology of the thing.
Yes. Just before we drop, we've got one other little story. Ipswich keeper on trial with the under-18s. I don't know if you saw the under-18s lost 3-1 to the Mags at the weekend, but apparently in goal was Alan Fleischer, who was an 18-year-old goalkeeper who's about to be released by Ipswich. So they're obviously letting him go off and train with other clubs and maybe trying to achieve a contract elsewhere. I think this is a 3rd or 4th player in the last few weeks when we've been doing these news pods where we've talked about a young player on trial. It's very quickly, Jonny, nice to see the club looking ahead to next season. This lad might not get a new contract with us, but still, we're looking ahead. We're trying to recruit, looking forward. I mean, that you don't have to wait till the summer to do that. You can, especially with young players, if they're allowed to go and chat elsewhere and train with other clubs and stuff, you'd be daft not to look, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this lad because I'd never heard of his name until you.
I was totally hoping you would know everything about this 18-year-old wonder kid from Ipswich.
Well, he was 3rd in the Premier League too with save percentage. Obviously, we all know that. But no, pretending to know him aside, I think it's. I like to see the fact that the club is still continuing kind of business as usual in terms of preparing for the future beyond next season, looking at these young players, bringing them in, giving them trials, stuff like that, because I think there's a temptation, particularly as fans, to kind of, in your mind, just pause everything, think about the playoffs and promotion, and then, the morning after, if you go up, you start thinking, oh, well, who we're going to sign that's in the Premier League? Or the morning after you've lost and you think, oh, well, who we're going to sign for the Championship? But obviously the club don't think like that. They've got all the different departments who are all working on, and also you'd imagine the parallel planning for both eventualities, because they'd be stupid not to. But it is just nice to see those little signs of kind of things just still ticking away and bubbling over underneath the surface, and, the club casting an eye over these players. Because like you say, I mean, you're allowed to do it. It's not going to cost you much, if any, money, so you'd be daft not to.
Chris, are you an expert on Alan Fleischer?
Well, no. It's the quick answer to that. I saw he'd been there since under 9s or something like that, so he's been there for like 10 years or whatever. But yeah, I mean, the way that the academy's run at the moment, and we've got people who are doing the business with everything else in terms of bringing players through, and it looks exciting at that level. So you've just got to trust them to say, well, they see something that Ipswich aren't, or Ipswich are in a different position in terms of what they've got coming through, where they might have 2 or 3 keepers a little bit older than him who are coming through, who are just ahead of him in the pecking order and might not be going anywhere. And the other thing is, that you do wonder what might happen with Patterson, because look, he's English and he's young and he's highly rated. He has had these dips of forms, but he is highly rated, and being English, that's important. And sometimes in the Premier League, having that English player on, even if it's on the bench. So if, someone costs, you see some foreign keepers who hardly ever play who cost 15 million or something like that. Now, if they get Patterson to do that and he's a young keeper, then it's why not. And I'm excited about Matty Young. I would have no problem if Matty Young, especially let's say if we didn't go up, I would have no problem at all if Matty Young's our number one next season. I think he's going to be a fantastic goalkeeper. And I think the longer we keep him, at bay, on loan, on the bench, I don't think that's a particularly good thing, because I think we'll lose him and he'll go on to better things. I think he's a top goalkeeper, or he will be a top goalkeeper. So we've got to have those pathways. And then if somebody does step up, you've got to have those positions covered underneath them. So it might be forward planning in that sense. But yeah, it's just good to see that they're planning.
You sure you're not Anthony Patterson's agent? Because you've been trying to sell him on this podcast for the last 2 or 3 months, I think.
Why, man? This is the thing. If you're talking 25 million euros for Bellingham and you can get 10-15 million quid for Patterson, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's not the random.
Well, that'll be all for today then. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Been great. Cheers, boys.
Yeah, pleasure as always.
Thanks to the listeners. We've got plenty coming up this week. We should have our preview for the weekend's game pretty early this week because we've got a lot going on. So Chris will be chatting to a QPR fan ahead of the game. So that should be out for you tomorrow. If you haven't heard the 2 pods in the wake of the game at the weekend, make sure you do catch them. As I said earlier, Jonny and Chris got together a full time on Saturday and did a very good job of putting everything into perspective after what was a pretty dull game of football.
So much fun.
Yeah. And me, Martin and Brett, who was at the Oxford game, we did bigger picture stuff. We were talking about the sort of the lay of the land and what's coming and all that. So even if you don't want to totally relive that Oxford game, I think the pods will do a good job of just bringing it. When we dropped off the call on Sunday, we were like, this is like free therapy, isn't it? You sit there and you just chat it out and you feel a lot better afterwards. So hopefully that's the case with our listeners. We'll probably have another news pod later in the week once Regis Labrie speaks to the media, presuming that's going to be Friday, actually, because if they're in Portugal, he's not going to be flying out Nick Barnes and the rest of the crew to chat to him. So that'll wait until they're back at the Academy of Light. But yes, we will be back at numerous points this week with podcasts. So make sure you are subscribed. You've got the notification button tapped and all that other shite, and it means that you won't miss another show. Make sure you head to rotoreport.sbnation.com. Loads going on over there. It's all positivity at the minute. We're trying to get everyone behind the team again. So let's all get on board for the playoffs. And once the games are out the way, we can then chat about what went right and what went wrong. Hopefully talking about a promoted Sunderland team. But yes, we'll be back later in the week. We'll catch you then.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.